Welcome to the land of the weird, the strange, and the most unexplained stories you'll ever hear. And best of all, they're all true. Welcome to Headphone Theater.
You know, the universe is such a beautiful thing to look up at on a clear night. So much to see. From a telescope, there are even more beautiful things to see. Distant planets, traveling comets, star systems. But most of all, there is so much space between all of them. Which leads me actually into the first fact in tonight's story. This is the story of 3 mind-bending facts about your brain and consciousness. Now, while the night sky is a spectacular show of amazing things, it is set up in an amazing way. The sun has planets that revolve around it. But in between those suns and planets are millions and millions of miles of empty space. Blank spots where there is absolutely nothing. Well, the strange thing about this setup is it's very similar to the atoms that make up the human body. The human body is made up mostly of oxygen at 65%. Then it's carbon at 18%. Then you get hydrogen at 10%. Then it's nitrogen at 3%. Then it's calcium at 1.4%. Then it's phosphorus at 1.1%. But here's the really strange part. All of those elements are made up from tiny, different configurations of atoms. And those atoms all have nucleuses, like our sun. And they all have electrons that revolve around the nucleus, just like our planets revolve around the sun. And just like our solar system, there's a lot of space between the atoms and electrons. There's so much space that our bodies have about 0.999999999 actual matter. Now, how small is that? Well, according to scientists, if you accumulated all the matter, you could place the population of Earth on a sugar cube. We are actually more ghosts than we are actually solid matter. And speaking of ghosts, this leads us into the second mind-bending fact in tonight's story. But before we go through that door, here's a little trick that you can do. It applies to what we're going to find out about here in the second fact. Take a coin and flick it in the air 10 times. Record if it lands heads or tails up. Now, flick the same coin another 10 times. But this time, while it's in the air, concentrate on it coming up either heads or tails. It might take a while, but you should notice a change in the amount of times it lands with what you were thinking of instead of not what you wanted. It's a neat little trick to show how you are influencing reality. Now that we know that, let's go into the second mind-bending fact. Have you ever heard of something called a random number generator? Or it's also known as a random event generator? Well, a random number generator, or random event generator, is just like it sounds. It's just a computer program that produces random numbers, just ones and zeros, like heads or tails. It was created at Princeton University in the late 70s to see how we are connected to consciousness and if we really do influence reality. If we do, we should be able to create patterns where there shouldn't be patterns. Kind of like influencing heads or tails. The numbers were all random. But if a group of people chose to concentrate on something, the numbers would become more aligned. Like picking the sides of the coin toss. So what scientists did was they put this generator in a group of people who were watching a game or a movie. Somewhere where there's a lot of people and everybody was focused on one particular thing. And lo and behold, they discovered that their thoughts were indeed affecting the outcome of these generators. All of a sudden, patterns would show up. So the scientists thought, maybe the whole world is somehow connected, like the people watching the game. So they decided to place the generators all over the world. And an amazing thing happened. When there were major global events, they would notice patterns on all the generators all over the world. Like when Lady Diana's funeral was taking place, all the generators were showing a solid pattern. Ones or zeros, it was either or. But it was meaning that all our thoughts were affecting reality on a global scale. But then something happened on 9/11 that threw a weird wrench into the gears of the random number generators. And that leads into the third mind-bending fact of the brain and consciousness. Fasten your seatbelts. This one is really weird. On the morning of September 11, 2001, the first plane slammed into the World Trade Center, Tower 1, at 8:45. However, and this is where it gets extremely weird, between 4 and 5 a.m. that morning, 4 complete hours before the first plane hit the World Trade Center, the global random number generators all began to align, telling the scientists that something was mysteriously aligning the consciousness on a global level. Almost like we already knew that something major was going to take place. A full 4 hours before the actual terror attack happened. And that leads us into the third mind-bending fact. What made you decide to click on this program? Even if we are friends or family or complete strangers, what was it that made you click on this show? By the way, thank you very much for doing so. But I ask that question because it leads into the third and maybe the weirdest mind-bending fact of your brain and consciousness. So let's go for a stroll down this weird and twisted path. There were these two scientists, Benjamin Libet and Bertram Feinstein, and they wanted to know, when does the brain become aware of something? Like, what happens in the brain to make you want to make a cup of coffee? And when does your brain activate your body to get up, go into the kitchen, and put on a coffee? Well, they discovered that it takes about 1/4 of a second for your brain to reach the decision on any given thing. Now, 1/4 of a second doesn't seem like a long amount of time. But if you step on a tack, or you burn your hand on the stove, or you put your hand on a candle, it doesn't take anything like 1/4 of a second to feel the pain, does it? It's instant. But how is this possible? If it takes your brain 1/4 of a second to be aware, what is going on when you feel pain? The brain runs every nerve in your body. That's why you're given anesthesia when you get operated on. It blocks the sensation of pain. But But how can you be aware of something like pain before your brain becomes aware of it? What is that? Or who is that? Another experiment that they did was they took people into a room and they sat them at a desk with a computer. They hooked up little sensors to their head that would pick up brain activity. And they told the people, here's what we want you to do. We're going to flash a colored light on the screen. When you see it, make a judgment as to whether you like it or you don't like it. And what they found was the brain was a half second ahead of what the person consciously would decide to do. The brain was already making the decision without the person even being aware of it. Then it would tell the person what it wanted them to do. And the person would follow and like the light or they don't like the light. What is that? Whatever that is the same thing, same part of our mind, same part of our consciousness, same part of whatever we are, that instantly makes us feel pain. Our brain is already making decisions for us before we even decide the decision. Dr. Fred Alan Wolf calls it riding the elephant. And he says it like this. You are your ego, the self, you and me, the people. And we're on top of this huge elephant. And the elephant is our brain. And we have a little stick. And you gently tap the right or left ear of the elephant, telling it which direction you want to go in life. But the truth is, the elephant has already made the decision to go either right or left. And it tells us to tap whichever ear corresponds with the direction it already wants to go. Every person on earth thinks they control their own decisions. But the truth is, we are only following orders of what the brain already wants to do by as much as a half a second. Tune in next week for another weird but true story right here inside Headphone Theater. And if you have a story to tell, email it to headphonetheater@outlook.com. I'd love to read it. I'm Alex McDonald. Be safe and take care.